9 HD4, the WJCT app, or on jacksmusic.org.
Hear from some of the biggest newsmakers in the community on First Coast Connect, where we discuss the issues and stories that affect your life across the First Coast. We also ask for your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Engagement is what drives the show. So engage with us right now as we get started here in just a few minutes on First Coast Connect.
And good morning. It's a minute after 9 o'clock. This is WJCT News 89.9, Jacksonville. More than 340,000 UPS workers are gearing up for a potential strike on August 1st after contract negotiations fell through earlier this month. Josh Holton reports labor organizers practiced picketing in Tampa and in other cities in Florida yesterday.
And if we don't get it, shut it down! When I say UPS, you say pay up! UPS! Pay up!
Dozens of delivery drivers held signs and shouted chants for improved wages and working conditions. Derek Bruni has been a UPS feeder driver for 20 years.
What the company's been putting out there, that's $92,000, $93,000, that's not completely accurate. There's a lot of people in the company that make a lot less than that, especially the part-timers, and that's one of the main purposes of trying to get them a better pay for the part-timers, and that's why we're all standing together in solidarity to get those part-timers that better pay and better benefits for all of us.
No additional negotiations are scheduled. The union will hold another practice picket on July 26th to recruit more workers, practice picketing, and to show solidarity in hopes they can show UPS they are prepared to strike by August 1st if they can't reach a deal. I'm Josh Holton in Tampa.
Duval County voters who want to cast ballots by mail for 2024's elections have to submit a new request to the Supervisor of Elections office. That's because all previous vote-by-mail ballots requests expired as of December due to changes in Florida law. Those who do need to renew for future elections must either mail in the renewal form they got in January, do it by phone, or visit duvalelections.gov. It's 81 degrees here downtown in Jacksonville, 92 for this afternoon, a 60% chance of rain and storms after 3.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
Hey, it's Al Letson. You're listening to First Coast Connect. We've got a full show tip for you today, so let's get it. On the menu for the Friday Media Roundtable today, Mayor Deegan puts the finishing touches on her budget. The city works to reopen pools as temperatures continue to soar. And housing leaders search for short and long-term solutions for Jacksonville's affordable housing crisis. Then later, new tunes from our latest JME DJ session. But first, this hour, it's Friday, and here to do the roundup with me today is my good friend Ann Schindler of First Coast News.
It is great to see you, Al.
It's so good to see you. Writer Nikisha Williams. Hey, Nikisha.
Hey, Al.
I have been a fan from afar for many, many years. You just told me that how many books have you written?
7, and if you follow me, then the one with the book deal is number 8.
Wow. I can barely put enough sentences together to make a paragraph, and you're making
And
books.
I know that's not true.
That's it. We can argue about that later. And the Clark Kent of WJCT News, Dan Scantlin.
Without his glasses on. Good morning.
How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
You like the Clark Kent?
Yeah, I do actually. Like
okay. See,
and I actually have a Clark Kent ID badge at home, so
all right,
I'll start wearing that just for you.
Look at that. Look at that. Listeners, have you seen this beautiful moment of connection between me and Dan? We are living up to the name.
Well, you can see it because it's live streamed.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to say that. Listen live on the radio or watch on our video stream right now on Facebook or on YouTube, and you can see all the lovely, beautiful faces in this room. Call us at 549-2837. Tweet us at FCC on air. Email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or message us on First Coast Connect Facebook page. So let's dive in and begin with our top story Mayor Deegan is scheduled to present her first budget on Monday. What can we expect that to include? And let's start with you.
Well, what we've seen so far is her capital improvement budget portion. So a lot of infrastructure projects, a lot of road resurfacings and improvements to drainage, things like the outfall in San Marco where they've had so much flooding. I think there's like $10 million earmarked for resiliency. Her capital improvements, that's basically like the brick and mortar stuff that the city pays for, a little less than what Curry had. He had about $500 million in his budget. Hers right now is looking at $430 million. Whether that all gets through or whether more gets larded on by city council remains to be seen. But just to keep that in context, that's about half of what the sheriff requested for his public safety budget.
Mm-hmm.
And despite some fears that from some sides that she might be cutting back on public safety, along with that public safety director comes, $30 million for new fire stations, and that's continuing what Curry was doing. We've got 7 or 8 new fire stations in the Curry administration. And then the numbers that you found over at First Coast News, $244 million to replace the jail, $40 million for a 500-bed detention facility, and $96 million towards a police memorial building. I don't know if that means to replace it or fix it up because it is a dinosaur from the 70s. But there's some serious public safety money going in there, along with the sheriff requesting a bunch of new positions himself. Of course, all of that is up for negotiation as the council gets it.
Do we see any big differences between Curry's last budget and this first budget from Mayor Deegan?
I mean, the crazy thing about this consolidated city of Jacksonville is that we give our incoming mayor, about 2 weeks to get everything together, in addition to like hiring all of the staff that they have to get into place and learning the ropes and figuring out where to, hang their coat at City Hall. They also have to come up with a budget. And so very often this first year budget is not too dissimilar from their predecessor. There just isn't enough time to move all those parts. So I think everybody expects the real first Deegan budget, where we're going to see most of her priorities best reflected, is probably going to come next year.
Mm-hmm. And what's next in Mayor Deegan's agenda? So she's tackling the budget. Is it just about going out and implementing these changes?
I think it's going to depend on what her priorities end up being. I mean, she has listed such a giant raft of things that she wants to accomplish and focus areas. She's delegating like crazy. I mean, she's got some very strong people in these positions, and I think she's going to give them a fair amount of autonomy. She's got a lot of committees that are gathering information right now and meeting with the community. So I think how all that lines up is going to direct her in the next year. But she's got more than enough to focus on.
Yeah, she's
a lot of priorities.
Keisha?
I think my biggest concern when you talk about the number of committees and delegation and autonomy is that Jacksonville historically over the last few years we've loved to have meetings, but then nothing really happens out of those meetings. It's like a meeting about a meeting to schedule another meeting to do something that never gets done. So I think with the wide scope of the budget, the priorities that she laid out during the campaign and in this particular budget, and then let's not forget that the incoming council, sworn-in council, also has its own priorities that may not align with the new mayor. So I think all of those are things to focus on and really prioritize, in my opinion, some of the things that have been promised but have never been fulfilled for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's spoken to that. I think, one of her things that she really stressed during her inaugural address was just the idea of living up to some of the promises that have gone unfulfilled for so long in this city, and making sure that there is, an inclusive conversation about how to, best proceed. But, those are wildly costly. I mean, infrastructure is very expensive, and it's just a fraction of the list of things that she wants to get to. I'll be interested to see if there's, if she makes any kind of push for a dedicated funding source for some of these, especially like resiliency, because, we've had 2 Republican mayors now that have successfully shepherded a tax increase, Curry with the gas and Delaney with the Better Jacksonville plan. And I guess it's somehow easier for a Republican mayor to get that through in a Republican, led city council and kind of an anti-tax city. But I believe, those kind of needs, resiliency, $10 million is nothing compared to, a city on the river with just massive flooding, risks, to say nothing of the heat that we've been seeing and kind of the forecast for that to continue to be a problem. That's part of the resiliency study that's supposed to come out in September, is dealing with heat and finding a way to, help the city cope. Our resiliency.
Climate change is coming. It's happening.
It's here.
Happening right now.
It's here.
Right.
It also is not going back. I mean, I think the
Right.
thing that a lot of people don't realize is that it's not going to get like it was. It is currently like it is. If nothing changes, it will get worse.
Right.
But right now, the climate change that has happened to date, because of what's in the atmosphere, this is, the baseline. This crazy weather we're having is as good as it's going to get
Right.
in our lifetimes. So preparing for that reality is something that's going to cost a
Well,
lot.
the reality is when I was here a few months ago for the last tropical storm and then remember seeing from Riverside Avenue to the river, Memorial Park, underwater again from that Publix supermarket for blocks. And that was just a minor hit that once again inundated the statue that was just almost destroyed during Irma. And then San Marco, yeah, there's a new pump there. But one new pump, you're right, and is not going to do it. And $10 million is a drop, sorry for the pun, drop in the bucket when it comes to the flooding that occurs along the St. Johns River in San Marco, Southside, St. Nicholas, down to Mandarin, and then let's not even forget all of the Riverside area that gets underwater when the tide and the moon are right, and we just get a nor'easter.
Yeah.
But when you talk about climate change and you talk about resiliency, that's also a conversation about infrastructure, all of which is expensive, all of which has not been addressed in a way that it should. And so this isn't a new normal. This is normal. We have normalized disaster and catastrophe, and we are expected to live with it. We have record heat every year. We have record flooding every year. And it's not just in Jacksonville. It's all across the country and it's all across the globe. So we have to be able to do everything at once. If you focus on resiliency, but then pull back from the infrastructure budget, the communities that are constantly hit hard, like Ken Knight Drive and Northwest Jacks, and all of those areas that still have septic tanks, that infrastructure is going to continue to erode. And so you have to think about resiliency and infrastructure and climate change as one piece, and then move the puzzle and then move it together so that everyone can recover and survive after a disaster, because it is coming.
It's more than just potholes. And Ken Knight Drive, you bring that up. I was there at the last tropical storm, and I could not believe the devastation again to those homes where the river behind them went all the way up to street level, right through the homes.
It feels like what we're hitting on here, though, is not just something that Mayor Deegan has to win over certain members of the city council. It feels like it should be a mandate for the citizens of Jacksonville to speak to members of city council, because if we're all being affected by this and for political reasons, members of city council aren't hearing it, it feels like I just think it's like really cheap to just say that Mayor Deegan has to go out and do all the work to bring people in to think about like infrastructure, whereas like it feels like it's something that the people of Jacksonville should be doing.
Well, I think she can animate the people of Jacksonville. I was talking recently with W.C. Gentry, who is handling one of her transition committees, and he actually was the attorney that basically shepherded Tommy Hazouri's odor battle through from a legal standpoint. He was the guy that figured
Thank God.
I mean,
the city really
right?
stunk back then.
Yeah,
Like, it was bad.
people don't realize, but I mean, it was a horrendous
Us old timers remember
Yeah,
well.
I
yes.
remember.
Yeah, and
I
so-
wouldn't say old timer, but yes, I remember.
The 1980s, the stink of Jacksonville, the smell of money was the great Channel 4 documentary.
Well, so that was the
Yes.
deal, right? So Gentry was saying at that time, the city council had people on even the council president, her husband had a cleaning business, and she didn't want to deal with the odor issue because she thought the restrictions would affect her own husband's business. So Tommy Hazouri got out there. He made this a community issue. He made this a community priority. And then the constituents went to their city council members and said, look, enough. Like, we're not going to be the city that stinks. And that's what you need. You need to animate your base, but you can do that, with the bully pulpit of the mayor's office.
Agreed, but I would also say that like the smell was something that we could definitely like put our noses around, so to speak. Whereas when we're talking about climate change, it's not just a debate within this community. It's a worldwide debate. In America, it's definitely a national debate about whether climate change is real or not. So if you are, you can grasp the idea of like Jacksonville smells, so we need to do something to fix it. But grasping the idea that climate change is affecting all of us when, there are a lot of big corporations and pundits who push against the idea that climate change is even actually happening. It's like you're fighting a ghost.
I'm going to just go ahead and be me. All right.
That's why we have you here.
So while there is a debate among people and pundits that whether or not climate change is real, there is not a debate on Earth.
Agreed.
The planet
Agreed.
has decided
Right.
that climate change is real. That's why it's so hot outside.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that,
no, and I understand that, but I think that if we're constantly having to try to prove to the detractors in the minority that the planet is hotter than it was, that we are living an unsustainable life, and then trying to convince them to do something for their children, grandchildren, their progeny, so that they have a planet to live on, we're not in a winning position. So I'm not going to debate whether or not climate change is real. Climate change is real. It's here. It's happening. We're surrounded by a river and an ocean. And the money to fight it is there. I said it in my last column. It's going to be an unpopular opinion, but JSO doesn't need $500 million to do what they still haven't done from a decade ago when the budget was much smaller and when the crime rate was much lower. We can reallocate resources in the current budget and take some of the money from public safety, because you cannot police your way out of poverty, and put that money into a resource such as resiliency and infrastructure so that we can all survive.
I'm Al Letson. You're listening to First Coast Connect Friday. I don't know why I keep messing up the word Friday. I want to say Florida. Friday Media Roundtable. Call us at 549-2937 or tweet us at FCC on air. Email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or message us on First Coast Connect Facebook page. And please call in, get in the trenches with us as we work all this through. So as we are talking about the heat, a number of the city's public pools remain closed despite soaring temperatures. But top officials from the mayor's office say staff is working to open 5 pools next week and come up with additional solutions for the community. Dan, you've been covering this issue. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is that you've got Emmett Reed Community Center, Terry Parker School, Baldwin Middle Senior High School, San Souci Pool, and Robert F. Kennedy Community Center pools will be opening, but you still have almost a third, if not more, of the community pools not in service. And within 2 or 3 weeks, school starts, the pools go to a weekend schedule, and then by Labor Day they close. So it's a losing battle to get the pools open when you literally don't have the weekday hours to go to them anyway.
Why are the pools closed in the first place?
Because many of them are at school facilities or at public facilities. And it's just been the tradition for all the years I've been here. The pools shut down when Labor Day comes. Summer's officially over, despite the fact that we'll probably have 90 degrees into November.
No, he means why are they closed now?
Yeah, right. Why?
Well, there's maintenance issues on some of them. There's a great drone shot that TV's using of one that's so green with algae you can't even see the bottom. But they have not been able to hire lifeguards. And lifeguards are usually that high school or college kid that needs the extra cash. And there's better jobs out there than being a lifeguard.
Yes, we've got a caller coming in. I don't have your name here, so caller, please stay on subject and keep it brief. Are you there, caller?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello? Yeah, my name is Trude.
Hi. What do you have for our panelists today?
Oh, okay. I think they should stop debating and doing something. And I want to ask, how many electric buses are running in Jacksonville? Okay, in China, in one town, one city, there are 16,000 electric buses going.
And
electric cars.
I think Dan was saying.
I don't think it's zero. I do believe they have some hybrid buses out there, but it is a tiny fraction of the overall. And they're going to propane, obviously, or had. But again, realize a bus EV is going to be really limited in range when it's fully loaded, and you got to stop and charge. And a bus is going to take hours to charge. So it's great for short routes, but it's not great for long. Now, obviously, in the future, when we get the Bay Street corridor going, you'll have the little people movers, and those will be great.
Sure. I think the caller's larger question has to do with like making decisive decisions around climate change and how that can affect our city. Thank you, caller.
I mean, in San Francisco, almost every single public transportation unit is electric. The streets are covered with wires.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
it's amazing at the difference between there and here, where we're still doing fossil fuel. But for that, you need federal help. You need federal infrastructure, and that's slow in coming.
As someone who's lived in the Bay for the last couple of years, I can agree with that. That there are wires all over San Francisco, and the buses move on them fine. But San Francisco is a little bit differently in the sense that like where those buses are going, it's primarily in the city, whereas like Jacksonville is so spread out and far apart. It'd be really hard to have those wires going from downtown Jacksonville to Atlantic Beach.
I'm just talking about the fact that it is a very zero pollution situation.
But I think we have to get out of this mindset of looking at what the startup costs for something that will be good sustainably are going to be, and letting that be the reason that we don't do it. Because, okay, yes, it's going to be expensive and difficult to transfer to electric vehicles or to solar or to wind or whatever the alternative is. It's just like when you do your home and you want to get the new windows because they reduce the electricity, or you put solar panels on the top, or you cut cable and switch to a streamer. The startup costs are expensive up front, but over time they begin to pay for themselves, and that's something that we need to do sustainably as a city.
And we've got caller Joe from Atlantic Beach. Joe, how you doing?
Hey, great to hear from you, Al. Again, this is your vegan friend Joe calling again to say hello to you.
Hey,
my question is, what does Mayor Deegan's budget address the food deserts in Jacksonville? As you know, UK Oxford study points 70% of all the greenhouse gases come from animal slaughter industry. So we do have to transition to a plant-based lifestyle to address climate crisis on our own personal realm. So how are we making sure that people in Jacksonville have affordable, healthy, and fresh plant-based foods available easily and accessible? And how is Mayor's budget addressing that?
Joe, thanks so much for calling in. Panelists?
Well, 32209 is a food desert. That zip code has maybe one supermarket. You need fresh food. You need the ability to get fresh vegetables, locally sourced, fresh bread, alternatives, locally grown fish or caught fish, and that's just not available. It's fast food, and that is contributing in the long run to so much more health needs, illness needs, hospital needs, hospice needs, you name it, it's there. That needs to be decided by one of these transition committees to try to get a sustainable supermarket or market proposal in some far-flung communities. I mean, Baldwin this week had no water. They have one little market that's community run, and everybody goes there. But wouldn't it be nice to put a larger supermarket somewhere near I-10 and Baldwin where you had the ability to get some fresh food and not pay an arm and a leg?
And I think it's interesting. I didn't realize until this week that Baldwin, like their mayor, had started that grocery store because they didn't have a grocery store. Like they lost the IGA or whatever
well, it was a grocery store off and on, because I actually did shop there once during a homicide situation a few years ago. But
now it's a community
right now
run.
It's a real market.
Yeah. I just think that's an interesting concept. It's run by the citizens. I don't really know what the financials are, but it's run by the city, and it's something that I guess the city could consider.
Yeah.
And we've got Daryl calling in from St. Augustine. Daryl, please stay on topic and keep it brief.
Will do, Al. I'm going to miss you on Reveal.
I'm not going anywhere on Reveal. I'm still there.
Oh, good.
You get double doses of Al. It's all good.
Okay. I think the single best thing that anybody in Jacksonville could do for global warming in the environment is get off 95 in US 1. And the way to do that is to get on that empty track that I'm looking at out my back door of the CSX Railroad that goes directly into downtown. all those people sitting on US 1 right now or 95, take a look to your right or your left and you'll see an empty railroad track. Get those people out of the car because they're all riding by themselves and put them on a train into downtown. It'll be so good. It works everywhere else on the planet.
So you're basically speaking in advocacy of public transportation, of figuring out how to really get public transportation going in the city.
All right. Well, you've got an empty train track that goes into downtown. What are you doing with an empty train track that goes into downtown and everybody's sitting on 95 and US 1?
Yeah. Daryl, thank you so much for calling in.
Al, there is a commuter rail proposal that actually has a terminus where the Browdy Liquors area is down there in St. Augustine with a lot of infrastructure improvements and restaurants and things, and would run into Jacksonville with stops in some of the more interesting areas like Fruit Cove.
Mm-hmm.
There have been town meetings, city meetings in St. Augustine and elsewhere about it, but right now it's being held hostage by funding. You're right. The rail, it's there. It is there, and it has been thought of. And you know as well as I do, there's been a commuter rail proposed down Phillips Highway, in the middle of Phillips Highway, above, and CSX for years. The plan is getting some traction, and it's a great idea. And they use as their model that very successful one that's down in Miami, Dade, and Broward, which is going gangbusters and opening stations left and right.
Yeah, it is a shame that the city does not have more public transportation, especially given all the things that we have been talking about today with climate change and global warming and all of that. Like, having public transportation cuts down on all of those things.
I never had a car till senior year of college in New York City because mass transit took me everywhere, to my girlfriend's place, to my college, to my high school, and then, by God, I had bicycles sometimes.
Yeah, but you're Clark Clan. I think you have a cape.
No, I don't. I was just younger then. I have no mass transit near me that I can use on the South Side. I cannot walk to a bus, or I'd have to take an Uber to get to the bus.
Yeah.
I don't even know where the bus stops are in Mandarin. And like, I'm from Chicago. I grew up with public transportation, subway, bus. It was a way of life. Even when I started driving, I might drive to the subway station, then take the train downtown. And for a city the size of Jacksonville not to have reliable public transportation that people can get to easily is part of the problem.
And the school bus issue could be solved if there was better mass transit, because then the high school kids could get passes, which are available through JTA.
Sure.
But if there was better mass transit that reliably got them to and from their high school, even for after-school programs, that would save the bus budget, which is a problem right now for schools.
And let's shift to another interesting topic: finding affordable housing in Jacksonville. It is increasingly difficult. This isn't just a problem in Jacksonville. I mean, this feels like a countrywide issue. Rents are going up everywhere. But housing leaders met this week to try and answer that question, to search for short and long-term solutions for Jacksonville's affordable housing crisis. Nikisha, let's start with you on this one. What do you think, and how can the city kind of navigate its way out of this?
I think everywhere you look, especially on the South Side, you see new apartments going up, but they're new luxury apartments where the rent starts at like $1,200, $1,500 for like 600 square feet, one bedroom, one bathroom. And who's living there?
Yeah.
Who's living there? That is not affordable housing. And even with all the projects that we see from the South Side to downtown to the North Side, they are not reasonably priced. And for whatever reason, there seems to be a reluctance to try to partner with federal aid programs to make sure that those people who are in low-income housing that is falling down, that is crumbling, have a place to stay where they will have some dignity and not have to call about, the sewage backing up, or there's an infestation here, or stuff is crumbling and the drywall is bad. And so when we talk about affordable housing, not just in the city of Jacksonville, but nationwide, we need to talk about what one organizing group, Florida Rising, talks about, which is like a tenant bill of rights that prevents price gouging and rent increases and has rent control and everything that people need to live, because one of the most important things that you need in life is a roof over your head.
I'm Al Letson. You're listening to First Coast Connect Friday Media Roundtable. I got it right. Call us at 549-2937. Tweet us at FCC On Air. Email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or message us on First Coast Connect Facebook page. And Nikisha was just talking about affordable housing. Ann, any thoughts?
Well, I think it was our colleagues at before reported on that they've determined there's 140,000 people who are waiting on the waiting list for affordable housing. But I saw recently that Florida is like one of the inflation capitals of the country right now, and that is largely due to our rising housing prices. So there are increasingly people in living in, whether they're kind of doubling up or couch surfing or moving from one family to another family's residence to stay, that just who are housing insecure. The solution there has been kind of implemented and then retreated from. There are a lot of new developments that have promised to make an affordable housing component to the new development. That's been part of the deal when they get approval for their PUD or whatever. Is some of this, Nocketee's a good example. There's going to be like a chunk of it that's going to be workforce housing. And then they go back when they realize how valuable the project is and how valuable the land is, and they ask, to roll that back, that requirement. And so that really is, I think, what's going to have to happen. There's so much growth happening in this area. I think that our leaders are going to have to hold their feet to the fire, developers, when they're granting these development rights, to make sure that there is at least some component of their new project that is affordable housing.
As WJCT News learned this week, that 147,000 people that are on a waiting list for affordable housing, that's just the head of household. That doesn't include the spouse, the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the kids, and there's 3,000 available rental units for those with a lower median income. The Blodgett villas of the 1980s, the housing projects we used to have here, that's not the future. What I was seeing in New York City is building small communities of tiny homes where you can rent just enough, and it's a nice home, little landscaping, maybe an amenity center, and put that where no neighbor doesn't like it. It's that pretty and that inexpensive.
And we're going to take a caller. Alan from St. John's, please keep it on topic and keep it brief. Alan, you there?
One thing I wanted to bring up about the swimming pools being closed, has anybody looked at what areas the pools are being not being opened this summer? I'm just frustrated because I know the 32208 zip code's got several pools, and I drive by one on my way to work that I was expecting to be open, and I usually see a lot of kids playing in the pool. But it just seems like the pools that are not being opened are in the poorer neighborhoods, the ones who I think need it the most, honestly. And I just wonder if anybody's looked at that.
Alan, thanks for that call.
Those
Dan?
5 new pools, the 5 that are going to open, are spaced in a ring around the city. So that's good news. There's also a proposal to try to get a nonprofit agency involved in maybe busing kids or taking kids from their neighborhoods to those open pools. And that's something that should be pushed upon for next year to get more availability of transportation to pools. Every neighborhood's got a community park. Make that a summer park, summer camp, and then have transportation from YMCA or something like that to a pool. And I know they do that in major cities.
I think what Alan was pointing to is the question of exactly where are the pools closed and if they're primarily closed in poor neighborhoods. I don't know if we have that data, though.
I don't have that data, but again, the 5 that are opening are interspersed around the city, and some are in some of the denser neighborhoods like Terry Parker, et cetera.
I'm getting a message from my producer, my super producer, Heather, that the information is in the notes in the script, but I don't see it. So join the conversation at 549-2937. You can tweet us at FCC on air, First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, and you can connect with us on Facebook. So we've got controversies that have been coming up ever since Mayor Deegan took her post. Last week, it was the news about Garrett Dennis and that he had given some of his campaign contributions to another candidate. This week, it's around Al Ferrero and his signs. I'm just curious, why are we hearing about this now? Because it feels so petty, like with a capital P and T at the end. Like, what is this? Is it even a controversy? It feels weird to call it a controversy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I the Garrett Dennis thing, it's not a lot of money, and it is kind of a minor thing. It's I think an embarrassment for the administration to have like one of their employees come under fire. But Garrett Dennis, I think, is got a record of integrity, especially how he performed under a great deal of pressure, behind the scenes manipulation during the JEA controversy. So I think that this community knows Garrett Dennis. The Al Ferraro, you're talking about the education exception. They want to waive the...
It's campaign signs.
Oh, campaign signs.
He got fined for his campaign sign placement, I guess.
Yeah, well...
Nikisha? Yeah, that size says it all.
It is very petty, seeing as how the outgoing administration was entangled with the selling of the public utility that is still going down in federal court.
You think a multi-billion-dollar scandal is more significant than campaign signs?
You don't? Why are we talking about this man's campaign signs? If Garrett Dennis, is he fined? He's going to be paying it back. Okay, can we move on?
Yeah.
It's a new day.
Al, I looked at the state statute regarding campaign donations, and I looked at it, I spent 15 minutes looking at it. Nothing in that says you cannot do what he did. It states only that if you have surplus funds, you should donate them to a charitable. So no surprise that even a most talented campaign manager might not know exactly what to do with the leftover funds when campaign A fails and you want to help two other candidates. And he's paying it back, or those campaigns are paying it back. It's going to charitable organizations, and the mayor says she has no problem with it. As far as Al Ferraro, how many times do we see campaign signs in places they shouldn't be? How many times does the city pick them up?
To be fair, if you're going to be running the neighborhoods, department or whatever, you're going to be in charge of those neighborhood communities. We don't want your snipe signs everywhere. I think that that's all right. This is probably just good training for the Deegan administration that, any little thing that
they're going to come after her, and they're going to come after the administration, and they're going to play long games.
She's going to be watched, just like any administration. And I think that's it's fair. She'll have to be prepared for that. I think she knows it. She's a former journalist, and I think she understands how that works.
And we're going to take a call. We got Keith from the north side. Keith, how are you? Keep it brief and keep it on topic.
Oh, yes. This week in Jacksonville, a game and fish officer pulled over a lady and held her at gunpoint, wouldn't let her get to her daughter. And I don't know, they don't have enough to do. You talk about wasting a lot of money. I don't understand why, and nothing's going to happen. They said they're going to check and see if they need more training. I mean, how can a game and fish commissioner, and she wasn't even in trouble. There was a mix-up with her tag when a JSO officer came up, and he's not even going to be held accountable. How can a game and fish commission officer hold a lady at gunpoint? It makes no sense.
Just for
have enough to do.
Just for the law's sake, game and fish officers are state law enforcement officers. They have the ability to do what any trooper or any cop does. I'm not explaining what happened other than to say they are cops. And in fact, they're used as those auxiliary cops for traffic control, et cetera, when some major events occur. So that's the reason why that officer had a gun. That officer had the ability to arrest. Certainly not well trained, especially in watching the video yesterday of a police officer, someone else who punched a woman who was holding a newborn baby in another city. That's not training. That's just a bad seed.
Well, recruitment is an issue and retention is an issue. And I think the JSO has said that most of the problems that they have with officers happen within the first 5 years when they're green, or perhaps they're on their way out the door. They just haven't been fired yet. So, very often those are young officers who haven't really learned the job.
I want to push back on that a little bit. Do we know, have we seen the numbers to know that that's actually true? Because, we know that police departments across the country, they tell us things that they want us to know, but it may not actually be what the facts are. And so I want to see numbers on that. Is it true that in the first 5 years, that's where the trouble comes from? And also a bigger question I have is that it seems to me that every time we start talking about police and policing the communities that they live in, if something happens, we always go back to they weren't trained well. I've heard that so many times for so many years. And I'm just curious, when are we going to start actually looking at what their training is and what and see if that is actually the problem, because I don't know if that's the problem.
But yet we had the 7th officer arrested, JSO officer arrested for an altercation in Clay County. I'm looking at the story right here, had 13 years on the job.
Right.
And we've had 7 or 8 officers arrested or police employees arrested so far this year. So to me, that's actually a little more than last year.
But all
and
of
they're
this
mixing training. Some of these are veterans
Right.
and some of these are young. And there is an increased push this year to look at the training and the action time and reaction of the younger officers to see if there's a problem in just being younger and not trained, in no seasoning of life.
Not necessarily. I mean, just being kind of a young hothead too, right?
Sure.
I mean, anybody that knows somebody who's like 20 to 25 years old knows that their, behavior, their kind of mental capacity to deal with stress is not as good perhaps as somebody who's older. Although I've done a lot of reporting on a particular officer in this city who's definitely seasoned and definitely old enough to have learned the ropes and is continually in these kind of situations.
Right. That's and I think that we can have this conversation and we can have a lot of stories and ideas, but I think it needs to come down to the data, right? Like, what does the data tell us? Is what the JSO says, that like most of the problems come in the first 5 years, and we need to see the numbers on that to see if that's actually true. Is it a question of training? Then we need to see exactly what the training is and understand exactly what the officer did right or did wrong according to the training.
I will say, so that they do an annual report that they post online, and to the extent that those are reliable numbers, the data show that those offenses happen within the first 5 years, that officers who are involved in response to resistance or who are fired or whatever, that those are the lion's share of those occur with the young recruits.
We're going to go ahead and take a call from Courtney in Mandarin. Courtney, please keep it on topic and keep it brief.
So my big thing is that we always talk about this, like, defund the police, and people get so upset about that term. But, like, we already have so much funding going towards the police. Why isn't it going to getting better qualified candidates and paying them better, and then their training instead of just, like, tactical gear?
Akeisha?
It's not a matter of whether it's training or age or even institutional bias or systemic racism. We have to look at policing as a whole, not just in Jacksonville, but as a whole in this country, and realize that a lot of the issues that law enforcement are called for, they probably don't need to be called for. And a lot of the ways that the community engages with law enforcement is aggressive and combative on both sides. So when you come from that standpoint, and that is why I said earlier when we were talking about resiliency and the mayor's budget, we have $500 million going to law enforcement for training, for gear, for a new building, for whatever they're going to use it for. When you call the police, a lot of the issues that they're called for are a result of poverty. People tend to commit crimes of survival when they don't have a grocery store in their neighborhood, when they don't have housing, when they can't make a car payment, when they don't have a good job. So you can't police and punish your way out of poverty. That has to be addressed from a social safety net point of view. That has to be addressed from making it a point to lift the median income in the city, or in making sure that people have the things that they need to live and survive. It's no wonder when you see in other developed countries that have a higher standard of living and, of course, higher taxes, that you also see lower rates of crime. So we can spend and spend and spend and spend on policing all we want to. And then when we have these flare-ups and these aggressive encounters that can end up deadly, because they have and they do often, the answer is not get more police, or then to say that the officers are skittish because of what happened to George Floyd or what happened to Ahmaud Arbery or what happened to Breonna Taylor. Those things have been happening for decades, for centuries, for generations. So let's not just put it on this one time where everybody was paying attention and decided to be woke about it. That's not what's happening. We need to look at the systemic issues that are really causing the root causes of crime, and then look at what can be addressed. Like if someone is having a mental health episode, is bipolar, is schizophrenic, why are we calling the police? Why aren't we calling a mental health service? Do we have a mental health service to call? Because if we don't, maybe we should, and maybe $250 million of the policing budget could go to that.
Well, I mean, that is like an allocation issue, right? So there are these co-police officers that are supposed to, in crisis situations, they're supposed to, go to help negotiate or to help deal with a mental health issue. But as we saw just like last weekend, there was an incident where someone was having a mental health related issue and was shot by police. We reach out to JSO and we say, well, why wasn't there, one of these kind of crisis negotiator? Well, they don't work on weekends. So the Safer Together committee came out with its recommendations like more than a year ago, saying that those roles need to be funded for every shift and every part of the city 24/7.
And that's what I was saying earlier. We have a tendency to have meetings about things and have reports about things, and then the results of those meetings and those reports don't go anywhere. And then we have another meeting about the same issue a year later, and then the report and the result goes nowhere. So it's a follow-through issue as well.
Right. And ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our lightning round. Oh, I love it when a plan comes together. Thank you, sir. So, everybody, please tell me the things that you are thinking about on the First Coast. I'll start with you, Ann.
AAA announcing today, not to be a downer, but they're also going to be canceling some homeowners insurance policies in the state. That comes after Farmers Insurance is now pulling out completely of the state. That's, I think, now 16 or 17 insurance companies that have stopped doing business in Florida in the last year and a half. That's after $3 billion from our legislature was supposed to stabilize this issue and encourage those companies from not leaving. Evidently, that's not working.
Lakeisha.
I'm going to keep it with the arts and culture. Summer in the Cummer is at full effect. Go to the Cummer Museum, hear the music, see the gardens. It rained last weekend, so this might be a better time to go, and that's where I'll be.
And Dan.
Wednesday night, 6 p.m., Prime Osborne Convention Center. You will have the sheriff himself and city leaders holding a town hall meeting to unveil some new things. And then on the 25th, Sheriff T.K. Waters will be right here in this room to talk to us and you about what is coming in the sheriff's office. So you can talk to the man.
All right. Dan, our Clark Kent here at WJCT. You like that? See, I told you were going to like that. Dan Scantlin, Lakeisha Williams, and Ann Schindler, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
Up, and away.
You.
This week on Science Friday, have you ever heard of underground climate change? We'll talk with an engineer who's monitoring the underground heat in downtown Chicago.
Over the years, there have been significant temperature variations, and as a result of these temperature variations, there are deformations. So the ground is deforming, and the soil, like soils and rocks, are basically moving.
Are urban buildings in trouble? On Science Friday from WNYC Studios. This afternoon at 3, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Outside, the heat is breaking records. Floods in the Northeast have been called historic, and the wildfire smoke from Canada still lingers. We'll have the latest from around the country. Also on the Roundup,
the idea that I'm biased against conservatives seems somewhat insane to me, given my own personal background.
The FBI director hits back at House Republicans who believe the feds are no longer a force for good.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. I'm Al Letson, and the Jacksonville Music Experience team covers all the latest music news from artists far and wide, including those making music right here in the 904, adding the best cuts from national and international and even local artists into the rotation on the independent 89.9 HD4, WJCT's new music discovery station. Arts and culture editor Matt Shaw is here to share 3 new locally made songs that have been reviewed on jacksmusic.org. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
All right,
Happy to play some music with you today.
All right, let's do it, man. So all of these songs are now in the rotation of the independent.
That's right. Yeah, we play a local song at 20 minutes, around 20 minutes after the hour, every hour there on our HD4 station. You can also stream that online through jacksmusic.org. But yeah, they've all been reviewed up on jacksmusic.org, and 3 great songs, all repeat offenders for our JME DJ sessions. These are artists, which is cool to see, artists who are making music and they're continuing to produce new work and new art. So we are happy to support those artists by playing them on the radio and reviewing their music.
Right on. So what you got first?
So Juan is the project of a Duval-based singer, songwriter, and guitarist. His name is Juan Malarca. His earwormy, super chill kind of indie pop has made him, as I said, a repeat offender here on Jamie DJ Sessions. A note about his popularity, nearly 40,000 monthly listeners on Spotify.
Wow.
Yeah, so your boy is tearing it up on the streamers. And although Juan's infused some Latin pop influences into his soundscapes in the past, his latest is the first song he's ever done, ever released in Spanish.
Okay.
It's a sincere love song. The object of his affection is his mother. Agradecido, which means grateful. Let's listen to his taste of that song by Juan.
Yeah. I love that. I just went to Spotify and followed him. Man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Juan.
Hot. Yeah. Yep. Next up, we've got Ebonique, one of our favorite local singers. Also a repeat offender here. Our admiration for Ebonique's fusion of neo soul and R&B is no secret. We invited her to headline our recent JME Showcase Series event at Blue Jay Listening Room back in April.
Okay.
Back then, she was fresh off a release of a new single called Cascade, but this one is called Respectfully. The foundation is hissing drum machines, like some really tasteful electric guitar leads, but the voice and the taste for melody, that's at the forefront, and that's what we love about Ebonique. So here's Respectfully by Duval's own Ebonique.
I appreciate the love you're bestowing upon me, because it's really lovely to now run upon me. And I promise I don't mean no strife, but them likes online don't equal likes in real life. So you're not my equal, you ain't no friend to me, you ain't my people, you ain't no king to me. I don't know what you
All right, man. 2 out of 2. I just went on to Spotify and followed her too. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. That's great. Yeah.
What you got?
Yeah. Teal Peel.
Uh-huh.
This is a project of a local instrumentalist and producer. His name's Taylor Paul Neal. Fun fact, Neal tours with Flip Turn, one of the biggest bands currently out of Jacksonville, as their sound engineer. So he's been running the board, making that band sound really good at large venues and festivals around the country. Anyway, Neal's studio chops, they really shine through on the music that he makes under Teal Peel. He recently released the Sandy EP, songs on which kind of ranged from this like dynamic Pixies style grunge to like some like really nice experimental folk. But at its core, the song Sandy, which is the EP's title track, is like this guitar, bass, drum driven, typical indie rock song with lots of surprises in it. Some atmospheric, some brass instruments. It's a really cool tune. So let's hear some of Sandy by Teal Peel.
Wish the sea swimming for me. Walk on the beach, but you're scared of getting sandy. You can't bear the feelings on your toes, but I don't mind.
Oh man, 3 for 3. Mad Shaw, you do not miss.
Thanks, man.
This was good. Oh man, these are good. I'm gonna listen to all of these guys this weekend.
Yeah, all local stuff, man. There's lots of great music coming out of Duval right now. So
Yeah, there's always lots of great music coming out of Duval. Like
There really is.
We are like the secret power of music all across the world. Like it's just good stuff here.
That's true. And it just reminds me, I've had my eye on Yellow Card. You remember Yellow Card? They're
back in the day.
celebrating 20 years
Wow.
since Ocean Avenue. and they're playing Daly's Place, I think, next week. So
you just made me feel
just
so
celebrating.
old. You made me feel so old because I remember when it came out. Like what?
Yeah. So I mean, as you said, always some great bands are just trying to shine the spotlight on them and make sure they can get out of town and other people can hear their music.
Right on. WJCT's new music arts and culture editor, Matt Shaw. Thank you for coming in and hipping me to some new music.
Yeah, man. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, so that is our program today. Thanks to all our guests and callers. Our executive producer is David Luckin. Senior super producer is Heather Schatz. Our director is Brady Corum. Thank you, Brady. You're amazing. Like every time I'm on the microphone, he cues me and says, "Hey, do your job." Technical help from Morning Edition host Michelle Corum. Look, if you have any questions or comments about First Coast Connect, send an email to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Feel free to tell them that you love Al. I'm just saying, you don't have to, but it'd be nice. You just say it. I'm Al Letson. You're listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. We will be back Monday. And if you missed anything, you can listen to the rebroadcast at 8 p.m. or find today's show at WJCT.org or your favorite podcast platform. And remember, y'all, keep your heart open for Duval and each other. Have a great weekend.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning,